Hello, Ohio State fans. Depending on when you are listening or watching this, we are days, maybe even hours away from the game. Ohio State, Michigan, the rivalry game that everyone looks forward to every year. Obviously, we didn't get it last year, so even more looking forward to it this year. I'm Patrick Murphy of Bucknuts and 247 Sports. I'm here with Zach Shaw, our 247 Sports Michigan reporter for the Michigan Insider. Zach, how you doing today?
I'm good. Fired up. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. It's certainly a big one. Obviously, these two teams, you don't need to have a top five matchup, but it certainly helps when there's more on the line. But before we get into this year's game, I want to take you back to the offseason. There's obviously a lot of talk about Jim Harbaugh and what his position was going to be going forward. There were contract talks. There was talk that he could be on the hot seat. Obviously, the year has gone very well for Jim Harbaugh, but what were your thoughts on Harbaugh coming into the year, and how has he maybe changed thoughts of Michigan fans with the way the Wolverines have performed this season?
Yeah, winning helps a lot. You said he could
Sure.
be on the hot seat. He was absolutely on the hot seat, and I think Michigan did something that I don't think Michigan would do if he wasn't a former All-American quarterback. And didn't have the potential to be kind of the chosen one in a lot of ways when he arrived. I think if he hadn't had that coming with him, I think they probably would have heavily considered cutting ties. I don't know if they ultimately would have, because the more removed we are from it, last season does seem weird. I mean, Penn State had such a down year. Wisconsin had a
Sure.
down year. Michigan did. Michigan State did as well. I mean, it was really, water found its level a little bit, not just at Michigan, but elsewhere. But he cut his pay in half. I mean, that's not something I don't know of any coach who's ever done that, certainly not at that high of a level. So,
Right.
I think his message was, I want to be here. I want to fix it. He takes a lot of pride in Michigan, and I guess to Michigan's credit now, they had the faith in him to make the real changes, not just, shuffling shuffling the chairs at the Titanic. He went out and got guys that were complete wild card coaches. Mike McDonald, the defensive coordinator. Sharon Moore had never coached offensive lines before. He did play offensive line, so it wasn't a total shot in the dark. But you're talking about guys who had never been in these situations. And Harbaugh's thought was, let's get guys on their way up. And there was also an emphasis on getting coaches who would really connect with the players, emphasize fundamentals and teaching. And I think Michigan, I don't think anyone's looking for an excuse as to why they were 2-4 last year, but they were extremely young. Not even Michigan, Ohio State, they always seem to be on the younger end of teams because they don't have guys stick around for fifth years. But
Right.
even by Michigan standards, they were extremely young last year with all the opt-outs, the injuries, and then the attrition from the year before. And so I think it clicked. I think it did, especially on defense. You're seeing a lot of first-time starters, first-time contributors who are playing really sound football. Not just, the defense was probably naturally going to be better than last year because it logically couldn't have gotten much worse. But you're seeing a lot of buy-in. You're seeing stronger fundamentals, maybe a little bit more disguises, schematically speaking. And so I think in some ways Michigan was probably due to bounce back this year, but the difference between coming into this game 8-3 versus 10-1, I think that comes down to Harbaugh, looking honestly in the mirror, not just looking in the mirror and saying it has to be better, but like thinking, I failed here, and I'm going to fix it this way and this way. So credit to him. He's not the only coach who's done it, but it's impressive nonetheless to go from 2-4 to 10-1.
Certainly, it's been interesting to watch. Obviously, coming into the season, I heard some people say that does Michigan make it to 500, and obviously
Right.
they far exceeded that. I forgot to mention at the beginning. If you have comments, questions for Zach, feel free to put these in the comment section. If you're watching this live, if you're listening to it after the fact or anything, like, subscribe, all that helps us out a ton. Zach, let's get into kind of the game here and some of the players. I think when I watch Michigan, it starts with the running game for me. Hassan Haskins, Blake Corum, even a little Donovan Edwards last week. Talk about these running backs and how this run game has gotten going for Michigan, how that sets things up for the rest of the offense.
Yeah, it's a pretty loaded group. I think the thing that stands out to me is just how tough they are. Hassan Haskins, he has over 200 yards, or over 200 carries, I should say. And I think only 2, maybe 3 of his carries all season have gone for negative yards. And that's not necessarily a credit to the offensive line as much as it is to him. It's he's got a ton of yards after contact, but then I think you could also, they don't track this, Pro Football Focus doesn't, but yards after the tackle has started, his ability to, the coaches call it the fall forward rate. Always seems to get an extra yard or two from what the play and the tackle would suggest he should be getting. And so he's kind of the, in the 90s, he'd be a Heisman candidate because that's, he's that kind of style of runner. He's physical. He doesn't go out of bounds, doesn't flinch from contact. Not super fast, but strong and durable. Blake Corum, we don't really know his health. He did dress last week, but he didn't play. It was the second week in a row. I think he has a high ankle sprain, so I think it's one of those things where he'll be game time decision. But he's really explosive. He's he can catch passes. He's fast. He's quick. He's probably in high school he ran a 4.44 at only 5 pounds less than what he's at right now. So I think he's got some real burst that Michigan hasn't had at running back ever. I mean, there's been a couple guys here and there that have been on the quicker end, but he's got, and stuff that's going to look good at combines, and Michigan really hasn't had that very much in the modern era of football. And then Edwards is interesting because I think he can maybe exploit something Ohio State based on what I've seen. They probably haven't faced someone like Donovan Edwards. He's only done it for one game, so I'm not not predicting anything, but his ability to catch passes, I mean, he looks comfortable as a receiver. And I think Ohio State fans, especially the diehards, remember him as a recruit. I mean, he was a 5-star guy, put up crazy good numbers, playing a tough schedule at West Bloomfield. And for much of the season, everyone in Ann Arbor was kind of like, okay, well, we Haskins and Corum are having great seasons, but Edwards was kind of supposed to be just as good, maybe even more talented. And now I think they maybe found a role for him. And that's something I'm certainly keeping an eye on is, it's easier to do it against Maryland, of course, but
sure.
That's another wrinkle that this running game and this offense has found that I think can make plays. I mean, not a lot of teams can prepare for everything, including this running back who suddenly catches 170 yards in the first game they really throw him the ball.
Yeah, with Donovan Edwards, I think he was the number 2 back in the rankings behind TreVeyon Henderson, who obviously has had a good year at Ohio State. I honestly thought that TreVeyon Henderson would have a similar type of season where maybe he'd come on late behind Master Teague and Mayan Williams, but he obviously took that role pretty early and has run with it. When you look at the quarterback play, Cade McNamara has obviously been the starter. J.J. McCarthy has had a role in some instances. McNamara's numbers are good, not great. I think his best thing is probably that he hasn't turned the ball over much. What do you make of kind of the quarterback situation? To me, that was what Jim Harbaugh was brought in to do. At least it was kind of the way he was advertised with what he'd done in the NFL and what he did at Stanford. I don't know if it's really happened yet, but it seems like this has been a good year quarterback-wise in comparison to some of the others.
I think the big thing this year is they got exactly what they wanted to get. They knew they were going to have a good run game. They felt pretty confident that they'd have an improved defense, and the Shea Patterson, Joe Milton experiences were not what Michigan fans wanted, and I don't think it was what Jim Harbaugh was comfortable with. They were more talented than Cade McNamara, but I think he wanted someone tougher mentally. I think he wanted a leader first, and then hope that over the course of the season the quarterback gets better as a passer. And to Cade's credit, that's what's happened. You look at his numbers more recently; they're much better than they were at the beginning of the season. I think he's found a little bit of a groove. He's able to throw over the top once in a while, but really, I think his sweet spot, just these past couple games, those short passes, the 1 to 10 and maybe 15 yards downfield, they almost look like he's taking the easy way out, but when it's open and he hits it, it's just really productive. That's how they beat Penn State, and that's how they put Maryland away early. I mean, I think a lot of teams are putting Maryland away early, but at the same time, there is some value in taking what the defense gives you. Early on, I think a lot of defenses were thinking, okay, stack the box, stop the run, and then play really far back in the secondary to avoid those random 50-yard bombs or whatever. And so now he's finding tight ends, he's finding running backs. So I think he deserves a lot of credit. I'm with you. His numbers aren't. I mean, I don't think any NFL scouts are sitting here drooling over 14 touchdowns in the first 11 games, but he has avoided turnovers. And then one thing I think he's also done well is he's he's quietly really good at avoiding sacks and I guess negative plays. He sees
Okay.
and feels pressure coming really well. He's not fast or not dual threat or anything, but he has helped avoid sacks, and I think he understands early on when to get the ball out on time. It's not, unfortunately, he made it not a fair comparison, but if you look strictly at the college level, it's Tom Brady style. No one's comparing him to Tom Brady now, but at the time, I think that was Brady's calling card. Henson was kind of the McCarthy, the 5-star with velocity.
Right.
Brady was more the game manager, but in a good way, not in the backhanded compliment, but like he legitimately had the teams believe, he had buy-in, he was a leader, and he didn't force things. McNamara, he's not going to throw in traffic if he sees a running back open for a 5-yard gain. He's pretty savvy and pretty good at making decisions, and that probably will never be a Heisman candidate, never be a first team All Big Ten guy, but I think the 10-1 stat is genuinely, honestly, not even just the cliche. I think it's genuinely the only stat he cares about.
Yeah, and I mean, you look back when Ohio State won national championship in 2002. Craig Krenzel was that type of guy. Nothing flashy, nothing like that. I mean, even Cardale Jones, when he came in, he could throw the ball, but
sure,
he wasn't a star quarterback. Real quick, what did you make of some of the comment that Cade McNamara made this week that kind of grabbed the headlines about Ohio State's defense? I think it was, I wouldn't say I'm very concerned about anything. I'd say we're looking to take advantage of Ohio State. As the week progresses, we're going to find ways to do that. I know this offense is going to be very confident going into the game. I personally didn't think it was that bad, but it seemed to blow up all over social media. You cover this guy, so give Buckeye fans your assessment of what he was trying to say here, or what he did say that maybe got taken out of context.
Yeah, I think I always laugh at those. It's not an Ohio State fan thing. It's our Michigan fans do it too, and all fan bases. It's like, okay, what's this guy gonna say? They're super good and we're screwed. Like, of course he's gonna be confident. But one thing I would kind of take away, just when you read the quote just now, one added thing I think is, I don't think this offense feels like it's hit its potential yet. I think the receivers have they've had some individual plays here and there that have been really exceptional, but I think they're still struggling, with on-ball, high pointing, breaking open against good coverage. I think the offensive line, they're very upfront about it with us that, partly due to injury, but also they're not holding on to blocks like they thought they were going to. They're not creating the holes that they thought they were going to. It's almost when you talk to them, you're almost like, well, how are you guys 10-1? How are you top 5 in the country at avoiding sacks and tackles for loss? But I think this offense feels like there's more to achieve. Now, there's not a lot of time, and Ohio State's defense, even if that's not the strength of their team this year, it's still a good defense. And so I think part of me thinks, we talked to a couple other players about it yesterday, and their message was kind of like, we just have to focus on avoiding our mistakes and executing our plays. Because if you watch the team over the course of the season, there have been a lot of potential open plays or potential game-breaking plays, including some games. They had Michigan State, Penn State, Nebraska. They had them all on the ropes, about ready to blow them out, and they let Michigan State come back and win. They held off Nebraska and Penn State, but I think the offense feels like they haven't been up to what they're capable of, and so that would be my guess. I can't speak for him totally, but that would be my thought. Is he was thinking, okay, there's every time they do film, there's so much that they want to improve on, and so that's got to be more of their focus than, oh, this defensive tackle's really good, or oh, this cornerback does this. If you're playing your good football, this offense does have a high ceiling still.
Yeah, I thought it was a little blown out of proportion. I agree with you. What else is he going to say? Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. You mentioned the hires made. Mike McDonald, obviously a big one with what Michigan's defense has done this year. What changes has he made? What's different than from what Don Brown was here that has made this defense so successful this year?
Yeah, they disguise coverages, they disguise blitzes. Period. It's weird. It's so weird that Don Brown had so much success when his defense was just that predictable. And that's. I mean, I don't know if I would do any better, but the fact is, I think Ohio State had the whole playbook, by year 2 or year 3, and the numbers kind of suggest that might be true. And so I think there's a lot more deception, a lot more variance. It's funny, even week 9, 10, 11, they were bringing out players who'd only played like 40 snaps all season or 20 snaps all season. They were starting. And so I think I think they're still experimenting, but ultimately I think they feel like they have 18 starter caliber players that they can roll out there. They can do different linebacker sets. They can do odd and even man fronts. They can have a few different safety roles. Daxton Hill, he's been at safety sometimes, but he's also been at nickel corner sometimes. And so schematically, it's a lot of deception. It's a lot of variance and adjusting to what other offenses do. It sounds so weird, but that wasn't what was happening in previous seasons. And so I think that's the main schematic changes. Getting Aiden Hutchinson in a stand-up role doesn't hurt either. But I think ultimately there's just a little bit more buy-in. I think younger players are being given a little bit more trust to just go out there and make plays. Junior Colson, RJ Moten, I guess you could argue David Ajabo, but he's a redshirt sophomore, but he was extremely raw when he came to campus. And so a little bit more trust with the younger players. And I think ultimately it's just a new school coaching, not just Don Brown, but Mike Zordich were very much like the 70s style, beat the right. If you run stairs, if you miss a tackle, very, very, strict. And I think these coaches are a little bit more, hey, these players, they have to be confident. They have to like us. They have to believe in us in order for the defense to work. And so I think there's a little bit more of a new school approach where the coaches are teaching, not disciplining, they're teaching. And I think with this particular group, some players maybe work better with Don Brown, but I think this particular group, I think they really like, the younger, more energetic, I don't want to say nicer. I'm sure they're still, hard because football's hard in general, but maybe a little bit more understanding when mistakes happen, more communication. So I think it's just really increased the buy-in and the trust in what the coaches are teaching.
You mentioned a couple of guys I was going to ask you about, David Ajabo, Aiden Hutchinson. They've come up a lot this week with our Ohio State media availability. Obviously, two guys that are going to be a factor in this game, I imagine. What has stood out about them? Why have they become household names this year?
Yeah, two very different paths to where they are, which is kind of neat. As a reporter to cover those kind of stories. Aiden Hutchinson, he's always been someone that was supposed to make an impact at Michigan. He was a top tier recruit. His dad was an All-American here. I mean, Aiden Hutchinson leads the Big Ten in sacks. He still doesn't have the family record for single season sacks. So he's got to work on that. But he's always been 6'6", 65. He's always been expected to be a really good defensive lineman. I think this year it was just about turning the quarterback pressures into sacks. Pro Football Focus, they've loved him forever. I saw him on several mock drafts as a top 50 prospect for last year's draft. And entering this season, he was expected to be really good. And he's just made good on his delivery. He's a little bit faster. He's a little bit quicker. I think his reaction time has really improved. Watch him on some of these replays, and he's like 3 steps ahead of his teammates. And he wasn't offsides. He just reacted that quickly. And his technique's improved. Ajabo, very different. He was a total wild card. I do think he was still a high caliber recruit, but it was more because of his athletic potential than anything he'd done on the football field. If I'm not mistaken, he had a Big Ten offer before he even played a game of football. Because he ran like a 10.92 100-meter dash at 230 pounds, in a track meet. And Rutgers was like, oh, yeah, you should play football. And he was like, okay, good idea. But he came to Michigan. The reports we heard was that he was about as raw as there's ever been a player, in Michigan football, at least on scholarship. And to his credit, he didn't let that slow him down. I mean, he consistently got better. I don't think he's as polished, especially in the run game, but he's fast. He's 255 pounds and runs extremely fast. I think both of those guys are going to test really well at the combine, which is why they're projected to be drafted so high. But to Michigan's, I'm sure Michigan's happy that they're also producing on the field. Ajabo, one thing with him, I think he might still lead the country in forced fumbles. If he's not up at the very top, he's close to it. And he's just got a real tenacious nature about how he plays, in addition to having great bend and quickness and acceleration that I think both of them have.
One of the things, and Aiden Hutchinson was one of the guys at Big Ten Media Days, there was like this talk about Michigan taking this rivalry, I don't want to say more seriously, because obviously it's always been taken seriously. And I think Aiden Hutchinson kind of alluded to that and then backed up a little bit and was like, well, we've always taken it seriously, but we're doing some things differently this year. I don't know if you've gotten any sort of inside info or whatnot, but has it seemed that, I don't know if it's throughout the season or this week, that anything's different in terms of the way they're approaching this rivalry game?
Yeah, this week they downplayed it a lot. I think they were scared that they were going to say something to, bulletin board material or whatever. But throughout the season, it came up more. They changed their 9-on-7 drill to the Beat Ohio drill. They added signs in their weight room that says, "What are you doing to beat Ohio State today?" Ohio State fans, you're like, okay, where was that before? And to that I understand. I think that was always something that we were kind of like, okay, Jim Harbaugh definitely hates Ohio State. He definitely takes this rivalry seriously. Why is it not being talked about more? And I don't, maybe it's just the right players, because Josh Ross, in addition to Hutchinson, another guy who has family that played for Michigan, he came back for a year that he probably didn't need to come back for, in part due to the rivalries. And so I think maybe them being captains helps, but we've heard about it more throughout the season. I think it was maybe the week after they beat Rutgers or beat Northern Illinois, someone was like, okay, well, you guys are 3-0. How do you keep that underdog mindset? And they said something to the nature of, our goal is Ohio State at the end. Our goal isn't to beat Rutgers, it's to beat Ohio State. So, which is how it should be. I mean, sure. One, just logically, Ohio State probably should be what you're aiming to be as a program, the way they've played lately. But then two, just the tradition, the history, and the fact that Ohio State is probably looking at Michigan at the end of the schedule every year. I mean, even now, even when it seems a little lopsided, it's still taken as seriously as it's ever been. So we're not invited to practice, so I can't officially say that. I don't have any great stories of them doing this, but I think there's been little tweaks here and there. And then I think they brought in 2 former players as coaches, Mike Hart and Ron Bellamy. That probably doesn't hurt. And I think they're just a little bit more open about, maybe not taking the rivalry for granted, maybe saying we need to earn our right onto that field and earn our right into that being a close game. And I can't say too much else other than that. I just because they haven't really said much this week, but it does feel like there's a little bit more of an emphasis, maybe a renewed focus might be a better word.
Okay, that makes sense. Mike Hart, obviously a name Ohio State fans will remember from that epic 1-2 game. Last thing I got for you, Zach, to get this game, to get this win, obviously Ohio State I think's won 8 of the last 8.
Yep.
Not only would that be the win over the rival here, but getting to Indianapolis for the first time, the potential for the college football playoff. What would that do for the Michigan program? Not that this program is hurting in any way. I asked when Ohio State played Oregon, I asked a similar question to some of our Oregon guys, and obviously that program hasn't been at the heights, but Michigan's program has a longer history and whatnot. So, but what would that do? Beating Ohio State, getting Indianapolis, for Jim Harbaugh, for this program, for the fan base, what would that mean?
I don't mean this as a cop-out. I don't think any of us know. I mean, it's been so long, and even when they did win, I think people were very excited, but that wasn't the same Ohio State team. And college football, even a decade ago, wasn't taken. The fans were invested, of course, but I don't think it was like, I don't know. It would change people's lives, really, is what it would do. As silly as that sounds, but Michigan's kind of, I don't want to say they're stuck, because you can still accomplish a lot even if you don't beat Ohio State, but the trophy case is empty right now, right? And so, and if you beat Ohio State this year, if you beat them in 2018, if you beat them in 2016, you probably like your chances of not only winning the Big Ten, but making the college football playoff. So that would be a much more full trophy case. There'd be no discussion of Jim Harbaugh's, hot seat or anything like that. I mean, and who knows what it would do for recruiting. I think Ohio State's been a machine for a while, so I don't think one win would reverse the recruiting roles. But at this current time, they don't really go toe-to-toe with that many recruits. If a guy's a take for Ohio State, sorry to Michigan fans, but he's going to Ohio State, and no one can blame him. they've won national titles lately. They've won the Big Ten 4 years in a row, and so I think it would alter a lot. I'm not exactly expecting it to happen, but yeah, I think it would send Michigan back into that top tier of teams, because right now I think they're in that Penn State, Auburn, Florida, Texas in a good year, USC in a good year. They're in that kind of tier where I don't think any people, they're good, they're winning football games, they're producing NFL players, but I don't think anyone's taking them seriously as a contender to win trophies or even contend for the national title. I mean, I don't think anyone in Ann Arbor has even asked about that yet, because the Ohio State's looming right there. I don't think they're a top 5 team, but Michigan fans are like not even discussing the playoff until they beat Ohio State, and so I think it would change the perception of Harbaugh for sure, but I think it would allow Michigan to kind of raise what it believes in a little bit, fans and players alike. I'm sure. I mean, they talk about national championships, but there's got to be a part of them in their head where they're kind of like, there's that team at the end of the schedule that we got to beat first. Yeah. So I think it would change. It's funny. I asked Steve Lorenz, and he's been at 24/7 for 7 years, and I was like, okay, so what would a win do like for recruiting? And he's like, I have no idea, because we haven't covered this yet. So gonna be interesting. It's their first top 5 matchup at home since 2003. It's the first time game days in town for Michigan, Ohio State, and Ann Arbor. They've been to Columbus like 4 times since then, but it's the first time in Ann Arbor since 2007. And I think it's the first time they're facing Ohio State at home with 0 or 1 losses since 1997. So they haven't, it's been a while since they've had a game this big. I'm very curious about the atmosphere. It seems like every time Michigan's good, they have to go to Ohio State. And so I think the players are cautiously, optimistic that, hey, maybe at home, maybe with the right crowd, maybe with, this culture, this energy that they've built all season, maybe they can put Ohio State on its heels a little bit. Don't know if that's my prediction, but certainly feels like a huge opportunity for the Wolverines.
It certainly will be. I'm excited for it. I'm sure you are too, Zach. Anyone listening, I have to imagine also pretty juiced up for this one. Thank you for getting on here, Zach. Thank you for everyone tuning in. If you listen to this, watch it live, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Zach, I'll see you up there Saturday. Buckeye fans, hopefully some of you can make it up there and make that atmosphere interesting. I think it'll be a crazy one. I always enjoy these games. So, Zach, thanks again. We'll talk to everyone here soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
For sure.